Josh here with GSA Focus, and I'm here with Tommy today from GrowthLab, Tommy Benz. We met somewhat recently and have talked a lot. He has a great product called GovCon Camp that I would recommend to anybody to basically take 5 years worth of learning in the government contracting space and condense it into is it a 6-week program?
6-week program.
Weeks. And it's pretty great. It's not like you have to sit there the whole 6 weeks and study. It's, bite-sized chunks that let you go about your daily life on top of doing all that. So great stuff. I'll turn it over to Tommy. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What led you to, founding GrowthLab, and just a little bit of your professional history.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Josh. Really appreciate you having me on. So yeah, I've been doing government contracting now for 15 years. So I spent 12 years working for small businesses of every size, color, shape. And a lot around professional services. So spent 12 years there. I started working for a company that was about to graduate from the 8A program, and worked there for a few years, then went to a company that was just starting their 8A. They had just gotten their 8A certifications. They were just beginning their 8A journey, and worked for an SDVOSB and then a woman-owned small business. So I hit all the certifications. One of the companies was the Hub Zone 2, so I hit all those socioeconomic certifications. And I'd been doing that for, like I said, I did that for 12 years, and then I just kind of hit a point where I was like, you know what, I really wanted to do something myself. And I felt like it had kind of been building. And I think, like most people that, before they start their own thing, it's like they have this thing that it's kind of gnawing at them a little bit of like, I want to do this, I'm just not quite sure what it looks like. And so I got an opportunity to do some consulting, and I loved it. And so I just kind of jumped in at full blast. And so I started doing consulting with a number of small businesses, and my partner was doing the exact same thing. And we knew each other from working together previously. And we realized, we were like, man, we're doing the exact same thing. We're just kind of like coming at it a little bit from different angle. Mm-hmm. And so we realized, like, well, why don't we kind of push this together and actually work together on this? So we started GrowthLab about 3 years ago, and the goal was to work with companies that are trying to grow. I had spent all of my career in the government contracting space doing both business development and program management. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made was getting my PMP certification and jumping into program management, because I realized I really didn't like program management. Mm-hmm. I was good at it, I just didn't like it. But I really loved doing business development. And so this was like, all right, that's gonna be our focus, is working with companies and helping them grow. And that just kind of covers a pretty broad thing. So one of the things that we talked about was doing training companies how to grow in the federal space, and which is how GovCon Camp came about. So that's been the kind of the journey, was just kind of hanging out doing government contracting for a while, and then wanting to start my own thing, and jumped into it.
That's awesome. Yeah. You definitely brought something out into the world that was needed. I know there's other training out there, but it's not as sophisticated. It's still kind of stuck in the 90s, 2000s, it seems. Whereas what you're bringing out uses modern tools, more visual, and I mean, you're a fairly new company, and things are and I could tell by talking to you, things are continuously getting better and better. You're improving, so that's really awesome. Let's jump right into the questions. The first thing I want to go over is just, I'm asked this quite a bit these days. I work to get a company, a small business, into the GSA program. And then we have kind of a debrief call after their contract's awarded, and their question is, well, what now? And I say, I don't know. I'm just a document guy. Not that I just want to cast them out and put them on their own. I'm here to help with maintenance and all that, and definitely have long-term relationships, but they're definitely asking questions that are outside of my lane. And I just want to put that question to you, kind of like, can you give a brief going over kind of like the standard process from RFQ, discovery and go, no go, or pass fail, to proposal prep, and just kind of that whole process. I think in your videos, in GovCon camp, it's pipeline, capture, bidding. So if you could just kind of condense into, a nutshell, those kind of three things in sequence, that'd be, I think, really helpful for some, just to get that perspective.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, so let's pretend that we're a company that we just got our GSA schedule, and it's like, okay, so what is the first thing that you need to do? And I would say the first thing that you need to do is get set up kind of internally to be able to do government business. And so that could be, your marketing things that I think we'll talk about in a bit, is like, we'll talk about like how to set up your marketing. So that needs to be done first. But then the next thing, if like from a winning work standpoint, is actually identifying opportunities. And there's a lot out there. Oh my gosh. I mean, like there's so many services out there, but let's just take the free ones, because that's the best start, right? So before we go out and spend a lot of money on all these identification things of how to find opportunities, let's just use the free ones that the government gives us. So the free ones that the government gives us are sam.gov, where that's where the government lists a lot of opportunities, and then also your GSA schedule that you just won. So you're going to see opportunities come up on that. So those are your free things that you're getting, and you're seeing opportunities coming up. Now, it's great that you know what's happening and you know what's coming out right now. But the way the government works is, because it's on such a long cycle, you've got contracts are normally 3 to 5 years long. And so when you're on this really long cycle, that means that other companies that are very well versed in this space and that are mature in this space, they're spending a lot of time looking at things that are about to come up, that are going to come up in the future, and they're prepping for those things coming up. So when you see them drop on sam.gov or on GSA schedule, if that's an existing contract, chances are that someone is prepping for this way ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways that you can do this, that you can find these opportunities for free, is you can use sam.gov, or there's a tool that's even easier to use, which is also free, that the government provides, called usaspending.gov. So usaspending.gov allows you to see these opportunities, like see these contracts that have been awarded to other companies, and let you know, hey, who it was awarded to, how much it was awarded for, and then when is it going to end, so that you can go ahead and kind of start prepping for that. So that's how you kind of start building that pipeline thing, is when you start identifying these opportunities. And when one of the questions I ask is, well, how soon should I be looking out? And I would say, start with creating something that's like 6 months out. So look at things that are going to be ending in the next 6 months. That's your short term. And government contracting, that's short term, is looking 6 months out. To do it, to be prepped and get aligned, to be positioned better, you want to start looking more like 12 to 18 months out. So I know that sounds like a lot. It sounds like a long time, and I get it, but that will be the thing. That's when you really want to start laying that long-term pipeline of looking at things further out. But start with short. Let's start short. Let's start 6 months.
Yeah.
So let's use USA Spending to find opportunities that are coming up in the next 6 months. And then we kind of, so then the question is, okay, well, what then? We found the opportunity. We've identified like 10 opportunities that are coming up. These contracts they look really interesting to us. We feel like we can do them. What do we do next?
Mm-hmm.
So the next part is the capture part. And so that's when the capture is when it means you're going out and you're capturing that information about that opportunity and setting yourself up to be in good position to win. So one of the things you can start with is, if that opportunity came out on sam.gov, there's a good chance that if it came out on sam.gov, there's a good chance that the RFP, the old RFP, is there in sam.gov. And so that's a great way to start, because you can look at the old RFP and you can see what the tasks are in that old RFP, and you get a sense of what they looked for the last time. Now, that may not be, it may not look exactly the same as it did, but it at least gives you, it sets you up to say, okay, I at least know that I've got to do task A, task B, task C the last time around. And I can identify, okay, I can do A and C, I can't do B. I may need someone else to come in and help me with B.
Yeah.
And that's where teaming comes in, right? That's where you find another company to come in to say, hey, we can do B and we can cover this. So like that's when that's also part of that capture process is putting a team together so that you can cover down on the opportunity and find and perform all the tasks that are listed there.
Yeah.
The next step would be, all right, we need to actually try to introduce ourselves to the customer. That's hard to do, right? How do you, I mean, the federal government is this vast bureaucracy. There's tons of people there. Like, how do you find the people that are buying this service? You can see who the contracting officer is, and because that was listed on the last time around. So you can see who the contracting officer is. Some people fall under the illusion of, well, the contracting officer is the person that I should talk to because they're going to be the ones who tell me what the government's going to need the next time around.
Mm-hmm.
Not so. I mean, the contracting officer is basically just, they're there just to do the acquisition part. That's their job. Their job is to facilitate the acquisition process. So the way it works is the program office that's buying the service, they go to contracting and they say, hey, contracting, we need to buy this service. Can you acquire this for us?
Mm-hmm.
And so then the contracting officer goes through the acquisition process to acquire that service. And so they may know, when you talk to the contracting officer, they may know like, okay, this is what the timeline looks like. This is when we're going to issue an RFP. But we don't know exactly we don't know what their government's going to need exactly.
Yeah.
That's when you need to try to find the program office. The nice thing about USA Spending and with SAM.gov and with FPDS, which is the Federal Procurement Database System, that's another free service, fpds.gov.
Yeah.
The nice thing about those is you can kind of drill down into what's called the funding office. The funding office is the office that's buying the service. They're the ones who are providing the money to buy that. Mm-hmm. And so when you find the funding office, then you get a sense of, okay, this is the office that does this. And then it's time to go to Google. It's time to Google the office, see if you can find the people in there. A lot of times you can see within the website, like on the agency website, you can see the actual org chart. And so you can see who the people are.
Yeah.
And then you're reaching out to them. LinkedIn's a great tool too. Like LinkedIn is, you can use that to put the program office in there and see who the people are there.
Yeah, LinkedIn is getting a lot bigger. And also like with each of the offices has usually a 5-digit alphanumeric code. So you're not Googling just general words, that code. Google loves stuff like that. Their results are going to be very laser focused in on the office that you need to find. And then navigating to the org chart, it's, do you need to talk to the facilities manager? Do you need to talk to the office, coordinator? It's usually pretty easy to do that. And it's surprisingly not as difficult as it would seem to get people on the phone, to call them and say, let me introduce myself, and that kind of thing. So right. Yeah, go on. I think you're getting into something else.
Yeah. So and it's funny because I think, so you're a big LinkedIn user, I mean, 10 years ago, very few people in government were on LinkedIn. And that has changed. You can find a lot of government people on LinkedIn now. And so the next step would be, okay, reaching out to that program office, that person, and saying, and be, I think I think people are sometimes worried about like, well, who, what can I say? What can I not say? And all that. I say, don't be worried about that. Explain that, hey, we're a contractor, we provide this service, we know that there's a contract coming up, and we'd like to be considered, and we'd like to, if you have a minute, we'd love to talk with you and better understand kind of what your needs are. Yeah. I think a lot of companies go into this thing of like, well, I need to go pitch myself, I need to tell them how awesome I am. And I'm just like, no, that is not what you need to do. You
Yeah.
need to start out with, I mean, think about whenever someone is trying to sell something to you and they come to you just bounding over, just like, this, let me tell you how great I am. And you're kind of like, whoa, calm down. Like, that's not, you need to
Yeah.
start with what their needs are. And so approaching them with the attitude of, hey, how can we be of service to you? How can we help you? How can we help you achieve your goals? What are your goals and how can we help you achieve them? And I think if you go in there with that attitude, it's a much better way to get yourself in the door and actually get an appointment if you approach it from that standpoint instead of the standpoint of, let me tell you how great my company is. Because
Yeah.
if you approach it from the attitude of, what are your goals and how can I help you achieve them, and how can I be of service to you, they'll probably then ask you about your company, and then you can go on and on about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And the great thing about LinkedIn is you get a little glimpse into their, professional history, and you can kind of go with that. You could maybe see what college they went to, talk some trash about their football team, that kind of stuff. I saw
Absolutely.
you went to Kentucky, yeah?
Did. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I went to UCSD. We didn't have a football team. We would kind of live vicariously through UCLA and Berkeley, but now that I'm in Alabama, it's a big thing.
That is a thing. And we're not even going to talk about Alabama football versus Kentucky football, because that's just not even a conversation. We're getting better, but it's still not, we're a long way away from Alabama.
All right. Well, yeah, now getting into the capture, and that's you gave good time to that because that's a big part of it. That's the nurture. And yeah, now I going into just the bidding process and all of that. And do you mind if I sneak a question in there real
Oh,
fast?
go for it.
Yeah, because you really launched a lot into kind of the recompetes. And that I've never really asked this question to somebody that's been worn a biz dev hat for decades. Um, Recompetes versus new contracts. What do you see more of? Do you see more recompetes? Is that for a company just getting into the federal space, if they're on SAM, just looking at mostly new ones, and I know recompetes come up in there. And for those that are watching and don't know, recompete it's an established contract. Maybe it was a 5-year contract with Lockheed Martin, and then it comes up at the end of that 5 years, it has to go out to bid again, and it's recompeted among all the businesses who want to throw their proposal into the bucket. So yeah, tell me about kind of like I guess the distribution. Are recompetes a really good move for a small business that's kind of a bit of a greenhorn to go after? Should they try to go after both new and recompetes?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I see more recompetes than new contracts,
Okay.
typically. And I think part of that is because it can be difficult to get funding if you're on the government side. Trying to get funding for a new project can be a lot more work than getting funding for an existing project and then
Yeah.
maybe adding some to it. So like,
Okay.
let's say you've got a project to do cybersecurity. It's easier for you to add something in there for like database management, because it's easier because you've already gotten approval for funding for your cybersecurity project. So it's
Yeah.
just easier than starting an entirely new one. So if you're a new business that's looking to get into government and you're trying to figure out, okay, do I look at recompetes or do I look at new work? That's actually, I'd say both. I think that you want to look at both. The nice thing about recompetes is that if you have access to that old RFP, you are able to prep for that ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that old RFP has been sitting there for 4 years and the contract ends in 12 months. You have 12 months to understand everything that the incumbent contractor that's there doing the work right now, everything that they're doing right now. You also have a chance to potentially talk to the program office and understand, what are they doing well, what are they not doing well,
Yeah.
and
And
be
what new needs are coming into the pipeline?
yeah. And so in some ways and so then if you look at new work, if they don't release, sometimes they do what's called a draft RFP, where they kind of give you an idea of like, hey, these are the things that we're expecting to do in the RFP. So you get a sense of it ahead of time. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And so then if you're going into it kind of blind, when that RFP drops, you've got 30 days to respond. You're kind of under the gun, right? You've got 30 days to pull something together, and you're like, man, okay, here are these tasks. So it's a really rushed process.
Yeah.
So there's good points and bad points to recompetes and new work. With recompetes, you have more time. It's tougher sometimes to dislodge someone who's doing the work right now, but you have more time to prep for it and get yourself in place. With new work, you have an equal opportunity with a lot of the other companies that are going after it, but you may have less time to prep for it and make sure you've got everything.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I had a really quick question that I think is a good one. I don't want to take a lot of time because there's so many good topics that we're getting to, but FOIA requests.
Yes.
On a recompete, if you put in a FOIA request, are you kind of putting a bad taste in the buyer's mouth about your company? Or did they just kind of see that as cost of doing business? It's what life is. It's one of those things in life I just got to do.
I think that there's probably not a one size fits all answer for that. I would hedge a little bit. What I would say is the way I personally do FOIA requests, and we do them as a third party. So maybe one of our clients says, hey, I'd really like you to do a FOIA request because I don't want them to know that I'm going after this. Yes. So we do it as a third party. A lot of attorneys do it as a service, that they'll do a FOIA request. So if you want to do it where they can't see who you are, there's a lot of different ways that you can do a FOIA request. I would lean more towards, especially if you're kind of a known entity, if the incumbent company knows who you are, you may want to maybe not tip your hat, be able to, let them know that you're going after it and use a third party to do a FOIA request. The other thing with a FOIA request, I would say is, keep in mind, it takes a while. It can take it can take a while to do. You do have to pay for it. It's not generally a huge amount of money, but you will have to pay for it. But the other thing, what I think a lot of people look at that if they just do a FOIA request for the RFP. That's generally pretty quick, and you can generally get a pretty quick turnaround on that. You can also do a FOIA request for the winning proposal and the winning pricing. Typically what happens is the government will send that back to the company who had the winning proposal and the winning pricing and say, redact anything that you don't, there's been a FOIA request, redact anything that you don't want in there. Sometimes they redact it, sometimes they don't. And so you can request it. You may not get it, but you can request it. I've also run into a little bit in the last couple of years because of COVID and because some people have not been in the office, that I basically just had my FOIA request shut down completely. They just said, hey, no one's in the office, so sorry, we can't do your FOIA request. But that does seem to be picking back up. When I just had one go through last month. Okay. So additionally, if you are doing a FOIA request where you're asking for a winning proposal and winning pricing, probably wouldn't want my name on it, because I wouldn't want to tip off the incumbent of who's requesting that. Yeah, good tip. Good tip. All right. Well, yeah, back to the question. We've covered pipeline and capture. Now just bidding, proposal prep. Can you tell a little bit about that? Yeah. So your capture should give you material to help with the bidding, right? So you want to do as much research on the office as possible, talk to as many people as possible, get as much information, so that when you hit the RFP has hit the street, we're writing our proposal now, you want to be writing your proposal. You don't want to be writing in the dark. You want to be writing with something of like, hey, I've done capture, I've done research, I've talked to people, and so I know what their needs are. So when I start writing this proposal, I'm not just writing a very generic response, I'm writing a really targeted response. So I would say the first step is you want to create a compliance matrix. And a compliance matrix is basically going through that RFP and pulling out all the requirements that the government has said, hey, you need to answer this, you need to answer this, your font should be, 11 points Times New Roman, and your pages should be 8.5 by 11, and your margins should be 1 inch around. Those things are important. I know it sounds crazy, but you can get disqualified if your margins are not correct. So the compliance matrix kind of goes through and lays out, hey, these are all the things that we need to make sure that you provide, and these are the things you need to answer, and these are the things that you need to do. And if you can, and so that way, when you have that compliance matrix, when your proposal's finished, you line it up against that compliance matrix and you check the boxes to make sure that it hits everything. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing is then creating kind of like your timeline of like, all right, we got the RFP today, the proposal's due 30 days from now. What does our schedule look like?
Yeah.
How do we, because it's a lot of work to put a proposal together, especially if you're a small team. If you're a small business, maybe it's just you and one other person or two other people. Maybe it's just you.
Right.
In that case, you got to have a schedule and you've got to figure out how you're going to break this into pieces to do it. So I would say it's important to have the schedule. It's important to have kind of a person managing the process, and then making sure that as you write these pieces, that someone else other than you is reviewing them against the RFP. So like what I do is kind of my cheat for when I'm doing proposals is I take the sections of the RFP out and I drop them into my outline so that when I'm writing, I can see, okay, so here's the section of the RFP that I'm writing to right here in front of me on the page. And I write to that.
You're typing right under it. That's great.
And so then when someone else other than me reviews it, and even if there's only two of you, you can still make this work because you can have one person write a section and the other person reviews it. And then the other person writes a section and you review it. So you can make it work with two people. It's not ideal, but you can make it work. And so it also helps in the review process, because if you're taking that little section of the RFP, when I review it, let's say someone else wrote it, I can look at it and say, okay, well, here's the RFP section that they wrote to. Here's what they wrote. Does it line up with what the government asked for? And so it makes it really easy to write to, and it makes it really easy to review. And then when you're done, of course, you delete the RFP sections out. And I would say having a review process, the Shipley method is a method that is a color team review. So when you hear people talk about red team and green team and gold team and all that, they're talking about the Shipley method. I think the Shipley method is a great method. I always kind of tweak it to make it work for whatever organization that I was working with, because I think some people can get really stuck in this, like, okay, Shipley says we have to do it this way and be very rigid about it.
Yeah.
If you're a huge organization, maybe you can get away with that. If you're a small business, you may want to streamline it a little bit to make it work for you. So make sure you have a review process, make sure that other people are checking everything, and then just make sure that you write. One of the best tips that I got when I first started doing proposals was I was really kind of struggling with how do you, because the government can be very formulaic and they can say like, the contractor shall do this, the contractor shall do this, the contractor shall do this. And I'm like, well, how do you answer that and say, well, we'll do that, and not look like you're just regurgitating what the government said, just saying we shall, we shall, we shall, we shall.
Yes.
One of the best tips that I got from someone that had been doing this a really long time, and I was kind of stressing about like, I don't know how to answer this without looking like I'm regurgitating. And he said, look, this is what you need to do with everything that they're asking for. You answer a few questions. You answer, hey, how are we going to do this? Who's going to do it? Where are we going to do it? And where have we done it before? If you can answer those questions toward each piece of this thing, you'll write a compliant proposal. And you'll write a proposal that's just not regurgitating.
Yeah.
And so if you can just answer those questions, like, how are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? When are we going to do it? Where are we going to do it? And where have we done it before? It makes it really easy. So so when you feel that stress of like, okay, I don't know how to write to this, take a deep breath, start answering those questions. And then it's like, oh, okay, no, I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. Okay. Well, we've covered all three of them really well. Next question is real quick. Which of these three areas should a small business really get good at? If resources are limited, there's the pipeline, bringing opportunities in, the capture process, and then bidding and proposal writing. Where is the low-hanging fruit to actually, have an impact on the batting average, winning percentage, and not necessarily have to, allocate more resources than are available, if that makes sense. So small business team of 3 to 5, and they're just, fairly successful commercially, and they're branching into the federal market, and kind of clean slate start, and they're going into it. Where should they focus?
I would say, and even though it may sound counterintuitive, what I would say is the bidding, because at the end of the day, you can do all the research you want. You can find all these opportunities. You can find out all this information about these opportunities. If you can't put a proposal together, you won't win any of them. So if I would back into it by saying, okay, we're going to learn how to do proposals. And it is difficult because it's can be kind of an awkward process that is very different than a lot of the way the commercial space works. It can be difficult to learn that. And so what I would say is you need to learn how to write good proposals, and you need to be able to turn and burn them. You need to be able to say, okay, we can churn out a proposal, we can do this, and we understand how to do a proposal, we understand how to do pricing. If you understand how to do those things, then you can start doing that identification early on, and you can learn how to do capture, and those things will come. But if you can't put a proposal together, those things won't help you at all.
Yeah.
And I see this happen all the time, where small businesses especially get choked by their inability to be able to put out proposals. And they're like, why aren't we winning work? And I'll say, how many proposals did you put out last year? And they'll say 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're not winning work. Because you have to be able to put proposals out. And so if you can build that muscle, then you can start getting more selective and getting better at it, and putting yourself in better position. But you've got to be able to do a proposal.
Yeah. I was talking to someone a while back, and they said just be prepared to go 10 proposals in and have nothing to show for it. But that 11th one or so, things will turn around eventually.
Yeah, and you need to be able to you need to learn from it. It shouldn't be a thing of don't just bang your head against the wall and say we're putting the proposals in. The next question I ask, because then when I talk to a company that says, okay, well, we've put 10 proposals in this year, we haven't won anything. My next question is, okay, tell me what you've learned from why you're not winning. And if they don't have an answer for that, then you're like, okay, you need to, did you actually ask the government? Did you ask for a debrief? Did you get a debrief from the government so that they were able to tell you, hey, these sections were deficient and this was why? That helps you. It's a painful learning process, but if you can take what the government gave you on why you didn't win and apply it to your next one, you get better. And so that's crucial to doing that.
Yeah, debriefs are kind of the silver lining in working with the government. As difficult as everything is, being able to kind of pick the brain of the person who didn't choose you is a huge advantage. And anybody that doesn't have a process to take that and pull from it, draw from it, that's their loss. And that kind of goes into the next question I had of just about can you go over kind of the post-award process, whether if company wins, obviously the post-award is, rolling up their sleeves, getting ready for the handoff to the deploying the solution. But then if they lose, there ought to be a process in place that of course includes debriefing. But yeah, what else? Do you have any other tips that can kind of guide a company, whether they win or lose?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say whether you win or lose, you should request a debrief, even if you win.
Okay. Haven't heard that one.
2 reasons for this. First of all, if you win, you should still request a debrief. And most companies don't do this. Most companies do not request a debrief if they win. They are like, hey, we won, we're good. What else do we need? First of all, you can always get better, and your proposals can always get better. And so finding out what weaknesses you had in your proposal, because even if you won, your proposal may have had some weaknesses. And so you want to get better at that.
Yeah.
It's a process of continuous improvement. But the other reason is someone could protest. So this situation happened to me personally, and this is a very hard won lesson of I was working for a company, we put in a proposal, we won, and we were of course ecstatic. We're like, oh man, we won, this is great, super excited. We found out a couple days later that another company protested. So when a company so this is a process, it's a legal process that if you lose, you could protest the other company winning if you felt like the government did something wrong in their evaluation. And so the government then kind of moves to the stage of whether they're going to sustain the protest, and that goes into a whole other rabbit hole that we could talk about for hours. Yeah. But basically what happens is it stops the win. So for our purposes right now, the protest stops the win. So it stopped the win. So we were kind of like, okay, well, we'll see what the government comes back with. So the government said, hey, everyone pull your proposals back and resubmit. Well, okay, so we said, well, we won. We should just resubmit the same proposal, right? It's a winning proposal. Well, what happened was we resubmitted the exact same proposal, and then we lost. That the government said, so the government came back and said, nope, the other company won it. And we were like, oh, we had a winning proposal. What are you talking about? And the government said, well, basically what had happened, we found out later, what had happened was that the other company protested. But before they protested, they did a debrief. They found out every weak spot in their proposal. So when they protested it and they stopped it, they went back and fixed all the weak areas in their proposal. Now, we had weak areas in our proposal too. We just didn't know it. We didn't request a debrief. We just had fewer than they did the first time around. So basically, at the end of it, we didn't find out our weak spots. We submitted our proposal back. They fixed all of their weak spots and submitted a brand new proposal, and they won it.
They were better at that point.
They were better. Their proposal was better. So what I would say is make sure you request a debrief, win or lose. The other thing that I would say, though, and this is also win or lose, is doing what's called, the military calls it an after action review or an after action report. I spent a long time working as a Department of Defense contractor. And so one of the things that I kind of took out of that was after you submit the proposal, and right after you submit the proposal, that's when you need to sit down with your team while the proposal is still fresh in everyone's mind. And generally, no one wants to do this, right? No one wants to rehash what we're like, man, we just got that thing out the door. We've been working on for a month. We never want to see it again. That's the part where you need to actually sit down and go through it and figure out in the process, hey, what did we do right with this process of putting this proposal together? And what did we do wrong? What do we know where things went badly? And getting feedback from everyone on the team that was part of that proposal. Because to get better at doing proposals, this is where you need to sit down and figure out your process and get your process more streamlined. So doing that kind of after action review of, okay, how did we do this? This is our process. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we do this better next time? And then after doing that, this is also the part where you want to we can create what I call proposal building blocks of saying okay, we have this, we've pulled this thing of, we did this proposal, we wrote up this process. We'll probably use the process again, right? At some point. So this is the part we want to kind of create these building blocks for our next round of proposals that we can use to do something, for the rest of, for their next several years.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be starting with a completely blank sheet of paper every time you sit down to do a proposal, right? That kills you on time. It's brutal. So this is the part where you want to create these new, these building blocks that allows you to not start from scratch every time.
Yeah.
So, and that could be your management process. That could be this is how we do program management. This is how we manage our subcontractors. This is how we recruit new people. Those things probably don't change that much, right? Unless you may need to tweak it a little bit to fit each requirement, but how you recruit people and how you manage subcontractors doesn't change. So that's a building block. And then if you're, whatever you do, if you're, if you're a video production company, how you shoot something and how you do post-production afterwards, that process is pretty much the same every time.
Yeah.
So pull those pieces out and create those building blocks so that you can start with that the next time and make it easier on your team.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That really, before we go in, that's such a perfect, everything you said leads so nicely into the next topic. But really quick, I wanted to summarize it because you hit on so many really good things. I mean, in this climate, protests are just a thing. They're here to stay. You haven't won until all the protests are settled. You don't think you did.
And don't talk to anyone. That's another thing too. If you win something, they have 10 days to protest. If some other company calls you and says, hey, congratulations, tell me about your win, don't say a word. Don't talk to anyone for the first 10 days until you're clear of your protests.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you too. That reminds me, in that protest situation you were in, what is your position as the winning bidder? Are you just forced to kind of just go sit on your hands and not do anything while the protesting company and the government are figuring things out, or do they bring you in and allow you to kind of make your case to keep the decision in place?
It depends.
Okay.
It depends. Sometimes you get an opportunity to come in and try to help support the government's position of why they awarded it to you in some way. Other times not. What I would say is absolutely get an attorney who is experienced in doing protests. Don't go use your corporate attorney that helps you draw up your subcontracts. Like, work with an attorney that's experienced with government protests, because it will help save you a lot of trouble and issues down the road. And you may be in a position where you want to protest, and a good attorney will be able to take a look at your case. If you decide, hey, I want to protest something, a good attorney will be able to look at it and say, hey, you know what, this is not a good case for a protest. You probably shouldn't do this. And so find someone who's good at it, and that needs to be kind of your de facto thing if you're involved in a protest, of bringing in an attorney that's good at protests.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I won't ask you to name names, but if somebody's looking for a good attorney, can they reach out to you?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to recommend some good ones.
With your experience, I figured you have a Rolodex that, is time tested. So
you and I are both old enough to know what Rolodexes are. So
it's a fun thing to say now. If it wasn't such a fun word to say, then it probably would have gone the way of the cuckoo.
Exactly.
Another old man saying. But yeah, you had started going into kind of like basically saying your entire process, pipeline capture, bidding, even the debriefing, and even if you win, handoff and everything is all just procedures. You shouldn't sit down and start with a blank sheet of paper every time you start a proposal. You should have a procedure in place, templates, all that stuff. So that goes into a question that I had, with your experience, what are some of the kind of like tools or the stack that a small business should have? Of course, having their own internal procedures, templates, and everything, but any technology or web apps that you can recommend, paid, unpaid, whatever they may be, that are time savers, quality enhancers, anything like that.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah, there is. That's an understatement. While we just started this interview, I think 2 new ones popped up.
Right, exactly. That for me, like what I may, and I'm probably kind of old school, what I really like using is, I use Google Suite for stuff. So I use Google Sheets, I use Google Docs, because I like to be able, like, for me, it's a way to easily be able to work on something in tandem with someone else in another place. And so for me, like that is really helpful. I haven't used a lot of paid tools. I know that there's a lot out there. I would kind of, I feel like I'm going to kind of dodge your question a little bit and say, I would say that you should find the things that work best for you. I'm
Yeah.
kind of old school in that I use a lot like the Google Suite thing and sharing things, and I keep my pipelines in Google Sheets, even though I know that there's other pipeline management tools out there. I'm comfortable with using those things, and so I that's what I use. Um, but I would say from like as far as tools that are helpful, I would say having kind of a go no go decision of whether you're going to bid something, and that can be kind of a decision gate. There's a free tool, and honestly, I mean, if anyone wants to email me afterwards, I'd be happy to email you the go no go tool, because that's a helpful tool.
Okay.
Um, if having like a compliance matrix, a capabilities matrix to determine kind of what your tasks are within the RFP, and having keeping track of your opportunities in a pipeline. And you don't have to use a fancy pipeline management tool. You can if you want, and if that works for you, great.
Mm,
I'm able to keep track of stuff in Google Sheets and put my ticklers and things on there to ping me on certain things.
nice.
But you can do a lot of these things using free tools without spending a lot of money on this. Because look, it's an investment, right? I mean, to invest in getting a GSA schedule, to invest in, putting man hours into actually going, bidding these things, it's an investment. You're putting a lot of hours into that. So if you can get away with using free tools to start with, that would be the way I would say to go to start with.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, very cool.
But I would say when we talk about kind of like a marketing thing, though, there are some things that I think I want to make sure that I touched on that briefly at the beginning of like, what's the first thing you do? The first thing you should do is have a capability sheet that kind of describes your services and hits kind of certain areas of, these are the things we do, and then this is how you buy from us, right? And so here's our GSA schedule number, here's how you get to us on there, here are our NAICS codes, here are, all of our things. So make sure you have a good marketing sheet. Again, I've got a couple examples of some that, if you want to email me, I'm happy to email you some examples of some sheets that are good, that you can kind of use as something that you can base yours on. And then the other thing is having like on your website, I would say having what I say having like a government services tab on your website.
Yeah.
So it makes it like, I look at every website. So part of what we do at GrowthLab is whenever we're with every engagement we do, it's called a marketing asset audit, where we look at your capability sheet, we look at your website, and offer suggestions on how to make them better. And what I tell everyone on the website is, I look at every website is, if I'm a government contractor and I go to your website and I want to buy something from you, how easy is it for me to buy something from you? Do you have a government services tab where I can go to easily and see what services you're offering to the government? And on
Mm,
that page, is there a link to your GSA schedule? Are your NAICS codes on there? Are your services listed? Is there a single point of contact that I can reach out to if I decide that I want to buy something from you? Like, how easy is it for me to buy from you? And you should make it as easy as possible. I mean, that's
definitely.
basically it.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, that you kind of you're so good at this. You're moving right from one question to the other. The next question is just, a small business just getting into it. What is the quickest path from $0 in government sales to $250,000 in government sales, which is kind of like you've started to pierce into the place where you're I'd say, seen from a KO's eyes as, kind of like initiated, or, if you brought in a $250,000 contract, you could do a sizable contract in their eyes with very little risk. So you're kind of like, you're coming on the inside at that point, in a way. Maybe it's a $500,000. I don't know what that number is. In my head, it was $250,000. But what's the quickest path? You went into, building your internal processes. You went into capability statement and web asset audit, and just making sure that branding and the face of the company is seen well, communicated well. All of the clutter and everything between the buyer and you is moved out of the way, and it's an easy transaction for the KO, the buyer side. But what other kind of things? You also mentioned going after recompetes, just kind of targeting those, because there's a paper trail for you to study and overtake. But yeah, anything else? The quickest path from 0 to $250,000.
Sure. So I think, so one is subcontracting, right? Because sometimes it's, what I find is the hardest part a lot of times is how to get that very first contract, because you don't have any past performance working with the government, previously. And so how do you build that past performance? So one is subcontracting. So if you do something and you do something well, and if you're a small business, finding opportunities for you to plug in to do that thing that you do well with someone who's doing something as part of a larger effort.
Yeah.
And so that's one. Looking for small things. So, just to be very honest, a lot of mature government contractors, if they see something come out that it looks like it's going to be like $50,000 to $75,000, they're not going to go after it, because to them it's just not worth the time. It's not worth the time and effort. But for you,
Yeah.
if you're brand new and you're just trying to get your foot in the door, a $50,000 effort that's great. Like, it's worth doing. And so don't overlook the small things, the little things, because it's all about getting some past performance, and then also being able to kind of get your foot in the door. Because if you can do that small thing and do it well, then you've got an opportunity to expand on that, and then come back and say, hey, we did this for you, we knocked it out for you. Is there anything else that we can do? We'd love to, we loved working with you. We'd love to do something else for you. And so don't overlook the very small things. And then, anything under $250,000 can be done as simplified acquisition. So again, just looking for those smaller efforts. The other thing is, like, making sure that you respond to RFIs, requests for information, because this is a sore subject, right? Because a lot of companies are just like, man, we hate responding to RFIs. It's a waste of time. We put all this time and effort into putting this response together. We send it in and it's a black hole and we never hear anything back.
Mm-hmm.
That is not an unfair characterization of a lot of RFIs. That's totally fair, and I completely understand why people are frustrated with it. On the other hand, the government does the RFIs for a reason. They're doing market research and they're trying to find companies that can do this.
Mm-hmm.
If no one responds to it, then they don't really have a reason to set it aside for small businesses, because they don't see any small businesses that say that they're capable of doing it. So I would definitely respond to RFIs, and be thoughtful in the response. Don't just send your capability sheet in. Actually put a thoughtful response together.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to spend weeks on it, but you can take some time to do a little research on the office and research on the requirement, and then put together a thoughtful response on how you could handle that. A lot of times what I've been seeing more lately is that the government does these RFIs, and then based on the responses, they do what's called a limited source selection, which means that if they get 10 responses back and 4 of those responses are really good, they may go directly to those 4 companies only and say, hey, give us a proposal for this RFP. We're giving this to you on a limited, and only to you.
Yeah.
This happens more often than you would think. And it happens a lot on GSA schedule. This is another reason why it's important to have a GSA schedule, because this happens quite a bit, that the government will use the GSA schedule as kind of a barometer to say, okay, So we feel like if the company has gone to enough trouble to get themselves on GSA schedule, and that they have, they've had their financial systems checked, and they've gone to enough effort to put themselves in position to do this, we're going to start with these companies, right? This is why we're going to start with companies who are on GSA schedule, and we're going to do an RFI out to those companies. And then if we get good responses back, then we'll go directly to those companies and say, okay, you give us a response on doing this. So that's another way, I feel like, to get yourself in good position to do that. So to summarize is, like, look for subcontracting opportunities. Don't overlook the very small opportunities, because they can turn into bigger ones. And you can also, it's a good way to build your past performance, and you may not have as much competition in going after the very small ones, because a lot of your more mature government contractors may not bother with it. And then also responding to RFIs, because it can put you in a really good position potentially to be kind of competing against a smaller number of companies to go after something.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, yeah, man, we covered a lot of ground. Any closing thoughts you had? Anything missed? One thing I would want to do is just plug GovCon Camp. I know you mentioned a lot of these resources, templates and capability statement examples and all that. I noticed that in GovCon Camp, you have a lot of downloads. So if anybody's interested in getting all of those, plus the instructions on how to, actually deploy them, manipulate them, make them perfect for your company, GovCon Camp is great. It's perfect. Reach out to Tommy. How does somebody reach out to you and, say, I'm interested, or I want to get started?
Absolutely. So if you're interested in GovCon Camp, you can reach out to me at tommy@govconcamp.com. And we also, our website is govconcamp.com. So check out the website. It also gives you kind of gives you an idea of what's in the course, gives you a little bit of breakdown of all the different courses in there. And then of course, I'm happy to chat with you anytime on just kind of what the course looks like and whether it's right for you. And then if you're looking for more of a consulting thing where you're like, hey, we're rolling here, we need some help on like winning contracts, you can reach me at tommy@growthlab.us. And our website is growthlab.us. You can check that out. And I think that's the best way to get in touch with me, but I'm happy to chat. So I love talk, I've spent most of my career working with small businesses. I am a small business. I love working with small businesses, and I love hearing about what you guys are doing. And so if I'd love to chat, so please reach out, set up a time, because I'm always interested in hearing just about the company and what you guys are doing.
Great. Yeah, well, thanks so much, Tommy. Any closing thoughts or anything else I didn't ask that about you? Or
I think the only thing I would say is just, I know that government contracting can really seem overwhelming to people who are not familiar with it. And it can feel like a lot. And to be honest, it kind of is, but it's totally doable. It's absolutely doable. And there's a lot of people who are really successful with it. And so I would say is, if it feels overwhelming, take a deep breath. I totally understand why it seems that way. But it's just like anything else, that once you learn the system and you learn the ropes, it's totally doable.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much for your time. This has been great. I learned a lot. I know that this is all going to be really helpful for everybody that comes across this. And thanks so much, Tommy.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate it.